Beneath the desert sun, colossal monoliths rise from shifting sands as if placed there by giants. Their sheer size and alignment defy simple explanation, forcing us to ask whether the ancients knew something we have lost. But deserts are not alone in keeping secrets. In the steaming jungles of Cambodia, temples swallowed by roots still whisper forgotten prayers. Beneath the oceans, stone roads disappear into the deep, luring divers into mysteries no map records. And on remote mountain peaks, walls of stone cling impossibly to cliffs, challenging gravity itself. Were these built with tools we cannot imagine or knowledge we no longer possess? Each unanswered question lingers like an echo across time. Now, picture yourself brushing sand from an artifact tracing glyphs carved by unknown hands, or standing at the edge of a temple where history dissolves into myth. And before we go further, remember, follow this channel to keep unraveling the world's enigmas and share your moment with us. Comment the time you're listening and the place you find yourself right now. Nefertiti's lost tomb, Queen of Shadows. Nefertiti, the famous wife of Akhenaten, disappears from records after year 12 of his reign. Her tomb has never been conclusively identified. You stand in the valley of the King's North Valley, near KV62, Tutankhamun's tomb. The desert air is bone dry and the sun beats down. Wind whispers through rock-cut doorways. Nearby archaeologists have hypothesized that hidden chambers may lie behind Tutankhamun's burial chamber, possibly belonging to Nefertiti. The notion feels both tantalizing and contentious. Your curiosity sparked when you read Nicholas Reeves's theory that radar scans showed outlines of doorways behind Tut's tomb. Subsequent scans produced conflicting results. Articles debated whether Nefertiti was buried in the Valley of the Queens in her city of Akhenaten or elsewhere. When a guided tour offered access to areas normally closed to tourists, you joined, eager to see the site that might conceal a queen. Inside Tutankhamun's tomb, the walls are painted with scenes of the afterlife. The air is cool. You notice that the chamber seems slightly smaller than typical royal burials. The north wall painting shows Tut with A, yet the composition suggests something larger might continue beyond the plaster. You feel the urge to tap the wall, but resist out of respect. The ceiling glitters with stars. A laser scanner technician explains that anomalies in the wall's smoothness could indicate blocked doorways. He points to tiny cracks where radar waves behaved oddly. Another expert counters that such anomalies may result from changes in plaster density. The debate is polite but intense. Meanwhile, Egyptian authorities have paused further invasive tests pending consensus. Politics and heritage intertwine with science. Leaving the tomb, you hike up a rocky slope to a lesser-known shaft. It descends steeply, filled with rubble. A cool draft emerges from it, carrying a scent of old stone and dust. Your flashlight catches a cartouche scratched on the wall, almost erased. Could this be a dead end, or a clue overlooked? Your heart beats faster. You are standing in a landscape where every rock could hide a chapter of history. That evening at a Luxor cafe, you read about Nefertiti's possible final years. Some scholars think she ruled briefly as Nefertiti. Others believe she died earlier and was interred in Amarna. A study of a mummified female head with delicate features found in a tomb near Amenhotep has been proposed as Nefertiti. Each hypothesis has evidence and counter-arguments. The lack of definitive inscriptions fuels speculation. Theories include a burial in KV35 where 2 female mummies were found. Others suggest she shared a tomb with Akhenaten and initially later moved. Fringe ideas propose she was buried at Akhenaten, her city on the Nile's east bank, but tombs there were ransacked. The possibility of a hidden chamber behind Tut's tomb remains alluring but unproven. The search continues, driven by technology and persistence. That night, you dream of walking through a freshly painted corridor lit by oil lamps. Nefertiti, wearing her blue crown, leads you to a door. She places her finger to her lips, then disappears through the wall. You wake with the desert dawn breaking, and the impression that some doors remain closed, waiting for the right moment and person to open them. Amenhotep I's Lost Necropolis, the missing funerary landscape. The Theban hills are a labyrinth of tombs and temples, each carved into limestone cliffs that glow golden at sunset. Everywhere you turn, there are entrances into the underworld. Yet, for Amenhotep I, a pharaoh credited with consolidating the new kingdom, his original necropolis remains missing. You stand among the colonnades of Deir el-Bahari, feeling the weight of the mountain above. The wind whispers down from the terraces, carrying grains of sand and secrets. Your adventure began after seeing a photo of Amenhotep I's mummy, a face serene beneath a floral garland. It was found reburied in a cache, not in its original tomb. A footnote in the accompanying article mentioned a lost necropolis that might contain chapels and tombs built for his family. That footnote gnawed at you until you planned a trip to western Thebes. The landscape is harsh and beautiful. Rocky wadis cut through cliffs, and the perfume of herbs burns on braziers near workers' huts. Local guides speak of a valley off limits to casual visitors, rumored to contain sealed shafts. You hike along donkey trails past tomb numbers painted on stone. The heat radiates off the ground, making the horizon waver. In a narrow ravine, you notice carved sandstone blocks, half buried in scree, their surfaces bearing fine relief of offering scenes. A faint blue pigment survives in the goddess's gown. You follow a line of sandstone fragments into a depression and find a doorway carved into bedrock, hidden by debris. Inside, hieroglyphs in beautiful raised relief name the beloved of Ahmose. The chamber is unfinished, with rough walls and a shaft at its center. As you shine your torch down, you see stairs disappearing into darkness. A sudden rush of cool air rises, carrying a musty, sweet odor of aged linen. You feel as if someone behind you exhales softly. The tension spikes when your flashlight flickers and goes out while you're halfway down the shaft. In the utter blackness, you hear a low hum that could be wind or a distant chant. Your mind races with images of collapsed tunnels. The air grows heavy, and you imagine the weight of thousands of tons of rock. Your heart pounds. You scramble back up to daylight, breathing hard as the hum fades. Later, in a coffee house in Luxor, you talk with an Egyptologist who has studied worker ostraka from Deir el-Medina. Some ostraka mention building the necropolis of Amenhotep in a valley where the sun sets between two hills. Another note suggests his tomb was desecrated early and relocated. A 19th century explorer recorded entering an intact chapel dedicated to the pharaoh's mother, but its location was lost when the map was destroyed. Theories swirl. Perhaps Amenhotep's necropolis lies in a small valley north of the known cemeteries, now covered by landslides. Some propose it was dismantled during Akhenaten's religious reforms. Others think it was purposefully hidden to protect royal mummies from tomb robbers, and that only a select few knew the route. Each guess is as likely as the last, a labyrinth of possibilities beneath the desert. As the sun sinks and the Theban cliffs glow red, you feel a slight vibration underfoot, like distant footsteps. That night, you dream of rows of shrines carved into an unknown wadi, each adorned with blue-painted stars. In the dream, a woman wearing a cobra crown invites you inside. You wake with the image of an unseen necropolis lodged behind your eyelids, and a desire to return lingers. The 10,000-year-old dwarf skeleton, a little human or another species. On the Indonesian island of Flores in 2003, a team of archaeologists uncovered a tiny skeleton in the limestone cave of Liang Bua. The bones belonged to an adult standing barely over 3 feet tall, with a brain the size of a grapefruit. Radiocarbon dating placed the remains at about 18,000 years old. Local folklore told of little people, the Ibu-Gogo, living in the forest. As a physical anthropologist fascinated by human variation, you read the first papers with astonishment. If the bones represented a separate species named Homo floresiensis, then our family tree just became more complex. Years later, you join a team traveling to Flores to examine additional remains and to engage with the local communities whose stories seem to echo this discovery. The tiny skeleton raises fundamental questions. Was Homo floresiensis a distinct species that coexisted with modern humans, or was it a modern human with a pathological condition like microcephaly or Down syndrome? As more bones are excavated, including wrist bones, jaws, and leg bones, it becomes clear that several individuals shared the small stature and brain size. You want to compare their anatomical features to those of Homo erectus australopithecus and modern humans using CT scans and 3D modeling. You also plan to collect DNA if preserved to see how closely they relate to us. The possibility of a different human lineage surviving until relatively recently fuels your desire to understand our evolutionary narrative. Flores sits on the Wallace Line, a biogeographical boundary separating Asian and Australian fauna. Homo erectus fossils have been found in nearby Java. The Liang Bua cave layers show occupation from 95,000 to 12,000 years ago, with stone tools, charred bones, and evidence of fire. The diminutive hominin remains found there date from 100,000 to 50,000 years ago, with some stone tools even younger. Island dwarfism is a known phenomenon in animals isolated on islands, leading to smaller elephants and deer. Could hominins undergo a similar reduction? Critics argue that one small skeleton could be an abnormal individual. However, multiple small individuals suggest otherwise. Genetic material is degraded in tropical conditions, complicating analysis. Debate within the paleoanthropology community is fierce. In Liang Bua, you help excavate a new chamber where more skeletal fragments emerge. The femur and tibia confirm small body size, while the wrist bones are primitive, resembling those of Australopithecus more than modern humans. CT scans of the skull show brain morphology distinct from microcephalic modern humans. The brain's frontal and temporal lobes are similar in relative proportions to Homo erectus, despite being smaller. Stone tools found in the same layer include sophisticated blades indicating cognitive abilities. Local villagers share tales of the Ibu-Gogo, small, hairy people who stole food and mimicked human speech. These stories likely predate the archaeological discoveries. Could oral tradition preserve echoes of encounters with another hominin species? The finds paint a picture of a population adapted to island life, possibly using fire and tools with a small but efficient brain. Back at your university, you present your findings expecting excitement. Instead, a heated debate ensues. A senior colleague insists the skeletons are microcephalic Homo sapiens, citing cranial anomalies. He accuses your team of sensationalism. Grant reviewers question funding for further excavations until the classification controversy is resolved. Meanwhile, an influential journal rejects your manuscript, suggesting it lacks definitive DNA evidence. In response, you collaborate with geneticists specializing in ancient DNA. After months of painstaking extraction from the dense petrous portion of a temporal bone, fragments of mitochondrial DNA emerge. Preliminary sequences show divergence from both modern humans and known archaic humans like Denisovans. The results are intriguing, but not comprehensive enough to sway skeptics. A media outlet oversimplifies the preliminary data, proclaiming Hobbit DNA, found fueling public confusion. You realize that scientific classification is as much about consensus as data. Evidence must be robust and replicable. You reflect on the temptation to fit fossils into preconceived categories. The wrist bones and brain shape argue for a distinct lineage, while incomplete DNA muddies the picture. You think about island evolution. Isolation can preserve archaic traits and favor small body size. Perhaps Homo floresiensis descended from Homo erectus, or an even earlier population that island hopped eastwards. Alternatively, they could be a dwarfed branch of modern humans, though their primitive features challenge this. You also consider the ethical aspects of naming a species. It impacts local perceptions and tourism. You revisit the Ibu Gogo stories, appreciating the interplay of folklore and science. The past is filtered through memory and bone, both fragile. One theory holds that Homo floresiensis is a dwarfed descendant of Homo erectus. Another posits they represent a previously unknown hominin lineage that left Africa earlier than Homo erectus. A pathological explanation suggests the remains are modern humans with developmental disorders. Genetic evidence so far leans toward a separate lineage but is not definitive. Some anthropologists speculate that they survived until as recently as 12,000 years ago, and that Homo sapiens may have encountered them, perhaps inspiring Ibu Gogo tales. Others caution against overinterpreting folklore as fossil evidence. The debate illustrates the dynamic nature of paleoanthropology and the challenge of reconstructing life from fragments. Years pass, and more fragments of DNA are recovered, strengthening the argument that Homo floresiensis was a distinct lineage. Yet, without a complete genome, questions remain. The classification gradually gains acceptance, but still has detractors. Liang Bua becomes a protected heritage site, drawing tourists and scholars. You continue to study island evolution, applying lessons from Flores to other contexts. When you return to the cave with a new cohort of students, you tell them about the tiny people whose bones lie beneath their feet and the villagers' stories of Ibu Gogo. You emphasize that science is an ongoing conversation. You walk out of the cave into bright sunlight, the line between myth and fossil shifting, like the shadows at the entrance. Somewhere, perhaps in unexplored valleys, more bones await discovery, inviting future debates about who we were and who we are. Loch Ness, monster Nessie, silhouette in the Highlands. Loch Ness lies like a dark ribbon amid the Scottish Highlands, its surface often smooth as glass. The water is peaty and deep, obscuring whatever might swim within. Tales of a creature with a long neck and humps affectionately called Nessie have drawn visitors for decades. You stand on a rocky shore near Urquhart Castle, mist rising off the water. The smell of damp earth and heather fills your lungs. A slight breeze creates ripples that catch the waning afternoon light. Your interest began with a photograph taken in 1934, allegedly showing a head and neck breaking the surface. Later you read about sonar scans revealing large moving objects and about the Pictish stone carvings depicting water beasts. When a friend suggested a road trip through the Highlands, you eagerly agreed, packing binoculars, a camera, and a thermos of tea. The loch is long and narrow, bordered by steep hills covered in gorse and pine. Tour boats cruise slowly, their wakes spreading like fingers. You join a small vessel equipped with sonar. The screen shows fish and the contours of the loch bottom. The captain points out where sonar once detected a large anomaly. The air is cool and your breath fogs in front of your face. A hush falls as everyone scans the water. Partway through the ride, the sonar screen pings with a large moving blip at 100 meters depth. The boat slows. Passengers lean forward. The blip moves slowly, then disappears. On deck, a ripple forms where the blip was. You think you see a dark shape just beneath the surface, but it's gone before you can focus your camera. A flock of ducks takes flight, and their disturbance spreads in circles. Later, standing on the shore, you see a long, low wake with no visible cause. It moves steadily across the loch, then sinks. Your heart leaps. You check your binoculars, nothing. Could it be a fish school, a submerged log, or something unknown? The rain begins gently at first, then harder. The loch darkens its surface, broken by droplets. In a local pub, you read books on the creature. Some scientists attribute sightings to wave interference caused by boats or internal psyches. Others mention misidentification of seals or sturgeon. The loch's long retention time means organic debris can float for years. Sonar anomalies could be schools of fish. However, sonar from Operation Deep Scan in 1987 recorded multiple unexplainable echoes. Photographs and films remain inconclusive. Theories include a remnant plesiosaur, a giant eel species, or an otter seen from a distance. Skeptics propose it's a cultural phenomenon fueled by tourism. Yet, sonar readings, eyewitness accounts, and the occasional unexplained wake keep the legend alive. Even if Nessie doesn't exist, the search has brought attention to a beautiful lake and local ecology. That night, in a small B&B, you dream of standing on a wooden pier. The water beneath is clear, and you see a large shape gliding by a long neck, eyes like polished stones. It looks at you briefly, then disappears into darkness. You wake to the sound of rain and the faint call of a loon, the image lingering like mist over the water. Abydos King List. Mystery. The names that vanished. You step into the dimly lit hall of the Abydos temple, where rows of carved cartouches march along ancient stone. The air hums with incense and the scent of old sandstone. Your guide's lamp throws flickering shadows across the wall, illuminating a royal list that seems to go on forever. Each name is a marker in history, yet you soon sense there are gaps where names should be blank spaces, where the story jumps ahead. It's as if the stone itself is hiding a memory, inviting you to lean closer and feel the uneven surface with your fingertips. An unsigned letter drew you here. It spoke of missing pharaohs and deliberate omissions, hinting that a conspiracy had been carved in stone thousands of years ago. The letter had included a charcoal rubbing of a cartouche you couldn't find in any book. Curiosity and a sense of mischief brought you to Egypt's desert to see for yourself. The hall itself is narrow and cool despite the heat outside. Glowing glyphs whisper stories, and the soft echoes of your footsteps mingle with the distant murmur of tourists far behind. Each cartouche is like a badge of honor, but here and there the surface is suspiciously smooth, as if someone sanded away a name. You can smell old resin and hear the faint drip of groundwater echoing from deeper chambers. In the shadows, you notice a pattern etched faintly behind a missing name, a tiny lotus, a symbol of rebirth hinting at something hidden. Running your fingers across the polished stone, you find a slight indent where a cartouche should be. A cold tremor runs through your hand as you trace the outline of an erased name. A gust seems to pass through the corridor, carrying a faint whisper that might just be the wind. You suddenly see an overlooked niche behind a column where a hieratic papyrus lies tucked away. The ink has faded, but the script speaks of a pharaoh who angered the priesthood and was stricken from history. The tension builds when the lights flicker and then go out, plunging you into darkness. You hear a low chant from somewhere beyond, a sound that seems to distort the rhythm of your breathing. For a moment you feel lost, as if the hall is twisting. Your companion's voice sounds distant. The carved names seem to glow faintly, and the erased sections radiate a coldness that pulls at your mind. Time stretches. You stumble toward the entrance but feel the path loop back on itself. Eventually the lights return and you find yourself at the original inscription again. Later outside under the Egyptian sun, you read up on the missing kings. Scholars call it damnatio memoriae, deliberate erasure ordered by successors to rewrite history. You cross-reference the pattern of omissions and discover correlations with periods of religious upheaval. An old chronicle in the Cairo library mentions a secret chamber containing the effigies of the erased pharaohs sealed to appease their spirits. Theories abound. Some believe the blanks were left to avoid summoning ancient curses associated with heretical rulers. Others argue that the omissions were hidden markers for secret rituals, a coded map for the initiated. There is even a fringe suggestion that names were removed because those rulers were never human at all, but manifestations of something else. None of these ideas have ever been proven yet. Each fits the feeling you had in that corridor that the stone was more than mere record-keeping. You leave Abydos, but at night you dream of running your hand across smooth stone, only to feel it sink into a cold void. In the dream, voices whisper those missing names in a language you can't understand. You wake with the sensation of sandstone dust on your tongue. Somewhere, perhaps those forgotten pharaohs are waiting for someone to fill in their names and bring them back into history. Naga Fireball. Serpent's breath on the Mekong. Along the Mekong River between Thailand and Laos, crowds gather every October to witness glowing orbs rise from the water and ascend into the night sky. These phenomena, known as Naga fireballs, are said to be the breath of the mythical serpent Naga. You sit on a riverbank near Nong Khai as dusk falls. Boats drift lazily. Vendors sell grilled fish and sticky rice. The smell of charcoal and river mud fills the air. Anticipation hums like the mosquitoes whirring around. Your curiosity was piqued by a travel blogger's account of mysterious lights emerging from the Mekong. Skeptics claimed they were flares launched by Laotians. Believers insisted they were natural, perhaps spiritual. A Thai friend invited you to the annual festival, saying it was part of her childhood. You accepted, eager to see if the river would indeed breathe fire. As darkness deepens, people line the shore. Monks chant prayers, and fireworks explode overhead. The river becomes a mirror, reflecting lanterns and the occasional flash of a camera. Suddenly, a gas ripples through the crowd. A small orange orb emerges from the water's surface, rises silently several meters, then disappears. Cheers erupt. Moments later, another fireball appears, then several more. They glow for a few seconds before winking out. Through your binoculars, the orbs look like glowing bubbles. They leave no smoke trail and make no sound. They appear irregularly, sometimes singly, sometimes in clusters. The crowd claps and murmurs respectfully. You feel a tingle on your skin, partly from the humidity, partly from witnessing something unexplained. A slight breeze carries the scent of incense and grilled food. Around 10 p.m., a larger sphere emerges brighter than the rest. It floats higher, then splits into two smaller orbs before vanishing. The crowd gasps louder. A dog barks startled. Your heart races. You glance across the river, but the Laotian shore is dark. There are no obvious signs of fireworks. Still, skeptics online would insist otherwise. You decide to simply appreciate the moment. Later, at a nearby temple, you read inscriptions of the Naga myth. The serpent is said to live in the river, protecting locals. Scientists have proposed explanations for the fireballs, including combustible gas pockets like methane igniting, spontaneously phosphine gas from decaying organic matter, or refracted light from headlights. Some villagers admit that in past years, flares were used to ensure visitors weren't disappointed. The truth may lie in a mix of natural and human causes. Theories also include ball lightning and bioluminescent algae, Meteorologists point out that the fireballs coincide with the end of Buddhist Lent and changes in water temperature. Cultural anthropologists note that the belief strengthens community bonds. Fringe theories link the orbs to UFOs. None fully explain why the fireballs appear in a specific stretch of river and not elsewhere. That night, back in your guest house, you dream of a giant serpent winding beneath the river, exhaling glowing bubbles. People along the shore bow in reverence. You wake with the image of orange orbs drifting upward and the understanding that some phenomena are as much about faith and tradition as they are about physics. Alexander the Great's lost tomb, the king without a grave. In the bustling coastal city of Alexandria, modern traffic roars above layers of history. Below these streets lie countless relics buried by earthquakes and time. Somewhere beneath the asphalt and concrete, legend says, rests the tomb of Alexander the Great. You walk along the waterfront, feeling the salty breeze, and hearing the calls of vendors, knowing that the remains of the man who once conquered empires could be within a stone's throw, hidden under centuries of silt. A chance encounter with an old bookseller started your search. He slid a brittle parchment across the table and whispered, "Find Soma." Written in Greek, the note mentioned a procession through the city carrying a gilded coffin. The story consumed you. You booked a flight and found yourself wandering the Mediterranean city, following the scent of spices and the promise of lost glory. Alexandria today is a collision of modern life and ancient allure. Apartment blocks stand on top of Ptolemaic foundations. Cats lounge among Roman columns. The warm air carries aromas of cumin and coffee, mixed with the briny smell of the sea. Fishermen haul nets near where Cleopatra's palace once stood. Somewhere beneath layers of brick and sand lies the Soma, the mausoleum built for Alexander that later housed other Ptolemies. Graffiti on a crumbling wall depicts a parade of elephants and Macedonian soldiers, a clue or just art. You join a group of local archaeologists exploring catacombs recently discovered under a library construction site. The tunnel is tight and damp. Water drips from the ceiling. Your flashlight beam catches frescoes of laurels and sunbursts. In a chamber at the end, a large stone sarcophagus lies off-center, its lid cracked. Inside, however, you find only sand. But carved into the floor is a map and etching of Alexandria's early layout, with a star marking a spot closer to the harbor. A faint symbol of a lion accompanies it. Suddenly, the ground trembles. A distant rumble reverberates through the catacombs. The flickering lights falter, and a rush of seawater begins to seep through cracks in the wall. Panic spreads as the archaeologists shout to evacuate. In the chaos, you slip and your hand brushes a hidden latch. A section of wall gives way, revealing a corridor filled with stagnant air and the scent of aged oil. You feel an overwhelming urge to enter, but a shout from behind pulls you back to the rising water. Back at the surface, dripping and exhilarated, you consult ancient accounts. Strabo and other historians described Alexander's body being moved multiple times. Ptolemy stole it to legitimize his rule. Later Roman emperors visited it, but then records fall silent. Some texts mention that the coffin was made of glass or gold, others of alabaster. A recently found coin shows Alexander being venerated in Alexandria centuries after his death, suggesting the tomb remained accessible for a long time. Ideas proliferate. Perhaps the tomb still lies under the current Nabi Daniel Mosque, where medieval travelers claim to see it. Or maybe it was looted and hidden in a storage vault deep within a catacomb now flooded by the rising sea. A more radical notion posits that Alexander's body was secretly moved to Siwa Oasis, resting among the dunes near the oracle he once consulted. Each theory inspires yet another search, another dig that ends with more questions. As you leave Alexandria, the call to prayer echoes across the harbor, mingling with the cries of gulls. At night in your hotel, you dream of a chamber lined with Greek inscriptions and filled with the scent of myrrh, a lion carved into its doorway. When you wake, the dream dissolves like mist, but the image of Alexander's armor glimmering in torchlight stays with you. Somewhere beneath those busy streets, the conqueror still waits. Atlantis. Myth or memory of a sunken world. Waves crash against rugged cliffs as you stand on a volcanic island in the Aegean Sea. Black sand beaches stretch out below, and the sky is streaked with the pink of dawn. This island is Santorini, once known as Thera, a place some believe inspired Plato's tale of Atlantis. Looking down at the crescent-shaped caldera, you see evidence of a cataclysmic eruption that blew away a civilization. The sea churns where land once connected, whispering of a lost world swallowed by water. You first encountered the legend of Atlantis as a child, reading about a perfect society punished by the gods. Later, an article about an underwater road off Bimini reignited your curiosity. When a friend invited you to join a geological survey of the Mediterranean, you seized the chance to explore the origins of the story firsthand. Santorini's landscape is dramatic. Whitewashed houses cling to cliffs like snow patches. The smell of sulfur still lingers around hot springs. At Akrotiri, archaeologists have unearthed multi-story houses with frescoes of blue monkeys and saffron gatherers, all preserved under layers of ash. The streets are paved with volcanic rock, and there are drainage systems sophisticated enough for any modern town. You feel the phantom presence of a vibrant Bronze Age culture frozen in time. During a dive near the island, you spot walls of what might have been a harbor now submerged. Pottery shards are embedded in underwater sediment. A curious formation looks like steps descending into the deep. As you descend further, your ears pop, and you hear a low rumbling, perhaps distant seismic activity. The temperature drops suddenly, and you see small fish dart away as if startled by something unseen. For a moment, you think you hear voices carried on the current. Back on land, as you analyze pumice layers with scientists, the ground shudders. A mild earthquake rattles tools and sends loose stones clattering. Your heart races, reminded that this region is still geologically active. The modern town's warning sirens wail, and villagers pause. The tremor passes quickly, but the sense of vulnerability lingers. You imagine what a major eruption would have felt like to Bronze Age inhabitants. It's the sky darkening, the sea withdrawing, then roaring back. Later, you review Plato's dialogues, noting that he placed Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Hercules and described a massive island empire. You compare this with geological evidence of Thera's eruption around 1600 BCE, which would have devastated Minoan trade networks. Some argue Atlantis was a moral allegory. Others see it as a distorted memory of Thera. There are other candidate sites too, like Spain's Doñana wetlands, where researchers found circular formations reminiscent of Plato's concentric city. Theories diverge widely. One suggests Atlantis was purely fictional, a political warning against hubris. Another proposes it was an amalgamation of multiple catastrophes from Thera to Troy. Some esoteric groups claim it was a high-tech civilization whose knowledge was lost. Meanwhile, certain geologists look at Bimini Road in the Bahamas and wonder if it's part of a larger complex. Each theory says more about the human need for origin stories than about any single site. As the sun sets over Santorini, casting orange light on the caldera's rim, you feel a melancholy fascination. That night, you dream of a city with gleaming walls and lush gardens sinking slowly as people run along colonnaded streets. You wake with the taste of salt water on your lips and the realization that, whether Atlantis was real or myth, its story warns of nature's power and human fragility. Axeman of New Orleans, 1918-19, Jazz Blood, and A Letter from Hell. The humid nights of New Orleans still carry whispers of the Axeman, a serial killer who stalked the city a century ago. In the French Quarter, wrought iron balconies drip with Spanish moss and jazz floats out of open doors. Street lamps cast hazy cones of light onto cobblestone. You walk these streets feeling the heat cling to your skin and a chill of anticipation. Every creaking shutter seems alive, every shadow potentially hiding a figure with an axe and sinister intent. Your obsession began after you read the infamous letter supposedly written by the Axeman promising to spare any household playing jazz on a particular night. The letter's tone, taunting, theatrical, almost gleeful, stuck with you. A footnote in a true crime anthology mentioned a diary from a witness never entered into evidence. Determined to find it, you booked a trip to Louisiana. New Orleans is a sensory feast. The scent of beignets and coffee drifts from cafes mingling with the odor of damp bricks. Second-line bands practice in courtyards, but under the lively surface lies unease. In the old archives you find yellowed police reports describing doors chiseled open and sleeping couples hacked with an axe. Photographs show splintered wood and blood-stained sheets. Locals tell you their great-grandparents slept with chairs against their doors that year. In a musty attic of an antique shop, you discover a leather-bound journal tucked inside a hope chest. Its pages detail a woman's fear of the night when the Axeman roamed. She describes hearing footsteps on her porch, then strains of a trumpet from a neighbor's house. Her writing trembles as she recounts a shadow passing her window and the faint smell of whiskey and sweat. The next morning, the butcher down the street was dead. As you read, thunder rolls outside. Rain pounds the tin roof, and the street below empties. The power flickers, and for a moment, the room falls into darkness. In the murky light, a figure seems to stand at the far end of the aisle, a silhouette wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Your heart thuds. When a flash of lightning illuminates the room, the figure is gone, leaving only dust motes swirling in the humid air. Later, you cross-check the diary with newspaper archives. The crimes were brutal and random. Victims were grocers and laborers, Italian immigrants, and African-American couples. Some survived and described a tall, shadowy man. The police arrested several suspects but released them for lack of evidence. The letter to the Times-Picayune claimed the killer was a demon from hell fond of jazz, but many think it was written by a local musician to capitalize on fear. Theories about the Axeman's identity range from a disgruntled merchant seeking revenge to a doctor suffering from delusions. Some believe the killer was more than one person, perhaps a copycat inspired by media frenzy. Others suggest it was a spurned lover disguised as a madman. There are whispers of mafia involvement and of cover-ups. None of these theories wholly satisfy because the murders stopped as abruptly as they began. As you leave the city, a saxophone wails in a bar, playing a tune reminiscent of 1919. That night in your hotel, you dream of a shadow moving through humid streets, hat-low axe glinting. In the dream, you hear a whisper, "Play jazz, or I'll pass you by." You wake with a start, the distant sound of a trumpet fading into dawn. The lost city of Pavlopetri, ancient streets under the sea. Off the coast of Laconia in southern Greece lies Pavlopetri, an underwater city submerged by earthquakes around 1000 BC. Here, stone streets, walls, courtyards, and tombs lie preserved under a few meters of clear water. During a sailing trip along the Greek coastline, you moored near the islet of Pavlopetri. A fellow sailor mentioned that snorkelers could swim above a 3,500-year-old town. Unable to resist, you grabbed your mask and fins and slipped into the warm Aegean Sea. What spurred you was the idea of floating over ancient architecture rather than walking it. Pavlopetri is unique. No other submerged Bronze Age city remains so intact. As an amateur diver fascinated by archaeology, you couldn't miss the opportunity. You also read that archaeologists used underwater 3D scanners to map the city, revealing urban planning reminiscent of modern towns. Curious about the sensation of gliding over streets where Mycenaeans once walked, you dove. Underwater, the world became blue and sound muted. The seabed sloped gently, revealing outlines of walls half buried in sand. Rectangular foundations formed grids. Low stone walls defined rooms. Some still had door thresholds. Amphora fragments peeked from seagrass. Fish darted. Sunlight refracted, creating shimmering patterns on the stones. As you swam along a street, your shadow glided over ancient thresholds. You felt like a ghost moving through time. A hermit crab scuttled across what might have been a household altar. Your hand brushed a stone block worn smooth by millennia of water. Turning a corner, you saw two parallel walls forming a corridor. As you approached, a small octopus shot ink and vanished into a hollow. Bubbles from your breath danced toward the surface. The water tasted slightly metallic. A faint current tugged. At one point, you felt as if the temperature dropped when you swam over a particular courtyard. The shift was subtle, yet real. You paused, noting that the seabed there bore a faint engraving of a spiral. Later, reviewing underwater photos, you noticed geometric designs carved into floor slabs where you felt the chill. Back on deck, wrapped in a towel, you learned from a guidebook that Pavlopetri boasted Rhodes' two-story house, gardens, and a tomb system. Excavations uncovered pots with linear B inscriptions. Some researchers suggest it was a trading port or administrative center. Earthquakes, possibly accompanied by tsunami, sank the city. Mycenaean ceramics date its occupation to 1600–1100 BC. Advances in underwater archaeology brought its layout to light only recently. Meanwhile, local fishermen had known of stone foundations snagging nets for generations. Theories about Pavlopetri's precise role vary. Some propose it was a hub linking Crete and the mainland. Others think it was a planned settlement showcasing urban organization of the Mycenaean world. Fringe ideas romanticize it as an Atlantis prototype. More grounded ones discuss sea level rise and subsidence as reasons for its submergence. Marine biologists point out that seagrass meadows now protect and obscure remains complicating excavation. Conservationists warn that anchor damage and souvenir hunters threaten the site. Since your swim, you find yourself tracing the outlines of city blocks when looking at maps, imagining waves covering them. When you close your eyes, you sometimes feel as though you're back underwater, breathing through a snorkel, gliding over silent stones. The memory of coolness above the spiral floor still perplexes you. Was it a cold spring emanating from beneath? Or your imagination, Pavlopetri remains both visible and elusive. A town you can visit only by hovering over it, never truly entering. Its stones rest beneath waves, reminding you how thin the line can be between land and sea, between present and memory. Ball lightning, spheres of fire in the storm. Thunder rumbles across an open field as a summer storm approaches. Dark clouds roll overhead, and the scent of ozone sharpens the air. You stand under the eaves of an old farmhouse watching for lightning. A bolt strikes a nearby oak tree, and an instant later, a glowing sphere detaches from the trunk and floats lazily across the yard, crackling softly. Its surface roils like plasma contained in glass. Ball lightning, rare and mysterious, has appeared at your feet. Your interest in this phenomenon began with a childhood story your grandfather told about a ball of fire rolling down a church aisle during a storm. He swore he could hear it hiss like a frying pan. Years later, reading a physics journal describing ball lightning as an atmospheric electrical anomaly, you longed to witness it yourself. When weather reports predicted severe storms in your area, you set up cameras and waited. The landscape is flat and windswept. Fields of wheat sway under the gusts. The farmhouse smells faintly of wood smoke and rain-soaked soil. Far off, you see lightning flicker across the horizon. The air pressure drops and your ears pop. As the storm front arrives, you feel your hair stand on end. A jagged bolt hits the oak tree, and for a brief second, everything is blinding white. Then, out of the settling smoke, a luminous globe emerges. It hovers waist-high, crackling quietly. The sphere moves unpredictably, drifting toward the barn door. Its color shifts from white to blue to orange. The smell of ozone intensifies, mixed with a faint burning odor. You feel heat emanating from it, but not enough to scorch your skin. The sphere passes through a wire fence, leaving the metal momentarily glowing. Suddenly, the ball speeds up, darting toward a puddle. Upon contact with the water, it explodes with a sharp pop, sending up a shower of sparks that quickly fade. Your heart pounds. The storm continues around you, thunder crashing, rain pouring. For a moment, you sense the world around you slow, as if pausing in awe of what just occurred. Then a gust of wind brings you back to reality. Later, you review the footage. The ball lasted for 12 seconds, the longest documented instance you've seen. Scientific papers propose that ball lightning might be vaporized silicon burning in the air, or energy stored in a plasma vortex. Some theories involve microwave radiation trapped in a bubble. Reports from airplane cockpits mention spheres entering cabins and passing through glass. Nothing is definitive. Even modern laboratories struggle to recreate the phenomenon consistently. Speculation is rife. Some believe ball lightning is a manifestation of ball plasma created by underground electrical discharges. Others think it is a purely psychological event, a retinal afterimage of ordinary lightning. There are even paranormal explanations linking it to spirits. Each explanation reveals more about human curiosity than about the spheres themselves. That night, you dream of glowing orbs dancing between storm clouds like lanterns. You wake to gentle rain, and the soft rumble of thunder. The memory of the luminous sphere stays with you, an image of the universe briefly bending its rules for you alone. Beast of Gévaudan, the terror in the French forest. Rolling hills and dense forests blanket the Gévaudan region of south-central France. Mist hangs low over meadows where sheep graze. In the mid-18th century, these fields were the hunting grounds of a mysterious creature that tore through the countryside, killing peasants and livestock. You walk along a narrow path through tall grass, the smell of wildflowers masking the faint odor of damp earth. Above, crows circle lazily as if waiting. You became fascinated with the beast after reading an old newspaper clipping about a monster that terrorized an entire province. The article described villagers arming themselves and royal huntsmen dispatched by King Louis XV. When you learned that reports and letters from that time still exist in archives in Mendy, you planned a journey to read them. The countryside feels timeless. Old stone cottages with thatched roofs sit among hayfields. The air carries the scent of pine resin and freshly cut hay. A local historian shows you a leather-bound register of deaths, listing entries marked "Teeth of the Beast." Illustrations depict a wolf-like creature with an elongated body and unusual markings. Some drawings show it standing upright, striking down its victims with unnatural strength. You visit a small museum where a display case contains a rusty musket said to have fired the silver bullet that killed the beast. Another case holds a wolf pelt large enough to carpet a room. You notice the pelt has an odd stripe down its back. In a glass jar sits a deformed skull with oversized canines. A placard claims it is the skull of the creature. As you lean closer, the electric lights flicker, and for a moment, the reflection on the glass looks like the beast's eyes glinting. One evening, fog descends quickly as you hike back to your inn. The forest grows quiet. Even insects stop their chorus. You hear a low growl followed by snapping twigs. Your pulse quickens. The shape of a large animal crosses the path ahead, briefly silhouetted by pale moonlight. Its head seems too big, its tail long and bushy. It moves faster than any wolf you've seen and disappears into the underbrush. You stand frozen until the night sounds resume. Later by the fire, locals debate. They mention that during 1764-1767, over 100 people were killed by something they called la bête. Reports describe it resisting bullets and ignoring traps. A hunter named Jean Chastel allegedly killed it with a consecrated bullet. Some accounts claim a second beast continued attacks. A bishop wrote pastoral letters attributing the attacks to divine punishment. Explanations include an oversized wolf, a wolf-dog hybrid trained to kill, or an escaped exotic animal like a lion. Others suggest a serial killer wearing a wolf pelt to disguise his crimes. There is even speculation about a remnant prehistoric predator. Each theory tries to reconcile eyewitness descriptions that often contradict each other. Some said the beast had stripes, others a red mane. That night, the wind howls around the inn. In your dreams, you see shadowy shapes stalking through wheat fields, eyes glowing amber. A chilling scream pierces the night, and you wake in darkness with your heart racing. Outside, only the soft bleating of sheep breaks the silence. The beast of Gévaudan remains a specter of fear that no explanation can fully banish. Heracleion, Egypt's underwater city, temples beneath the tide. In the shallow waters off Egypt's northern coast, divers descend through a murky green world. Shafts of sunlight penetrate the waves, illuminating columns, statues, and crumbled walls lying on the seabed. Fish dart among hieroglyphic inscribed blocks. This is Heracleion, an ancient port city, once bustling with priests and merchants, now submerged. You float weightless above a toppled statue of Hapi, the Nile god, feeling both awe and the weight of time pressing down through water. Your invitation came from a marine archaeologist who included a photograph of a colossal red granite pharaoh's face resting on sand. His note read, "Come see the gods asleep." Intrigued by tales of a lost city mentioned by Herodotus and long dismissed as myth you accepted, you trained for months to dive in zero visibility conditions, driven by the promise of touching history hidden for centuries. The dive begins from a small boat bobbing in Abu Qir Bay. The smell of diesel mixes with salt. You put on a dry suit and slip into water that is surprisingly warm. Visibility is limited, fine silt clouds at the slightest motion. As your eyes adjust, shapes emerge: a giant hand carved in red granite, then a fragment of a stela with Greek and Egyptian text. Eelgrass brushes your fingers. Your breathing echoes in your ears, rhythmic and calming. You follow a guideline to the remains of a temple pylon. Its blocks are encrusted with marine growth, but still bear reliefs of offerings. You shine your light into a cavity and discover a bronze statuette of Isis wedged between stones. Its features are remarkably preserved, the eyes inlaid with gold foil. As you carefully extract it, a surge in the current tugs you sideways. You grip the rope and feel a low-frequency vibration like distant thunder underwater. Suddenly, the water around you becomes hazy. The silt rises, and your visibility drops to nothing. The rope in your hand thrums as if plucked. For a few seconds, you hear a hum that seems to come from the stones themselves. You hold still until the current eases and the cloud settles. The sensation of being in a living, breathing city that still shifts below the sea is uncanny. Back on the boat, you handle the recovered statuette. Later in the lab X-rays, reveal inscriptions referencing a festival dedicated to Osiris that took place annually at Heracleion. Ancient texts describe the city as a hub where taxes were collected and temples housed relics. Earthquakes and a rise in sea level likely caused the land to liquefy and sink. The discovery of shipwrecks with Greek pottery shows it was a melting pot of cultures. Theories about Heracleon's fate include a combination of subsidence tsunamis and sediment compaction. Some suggest the city gradually sank as the delta's weight shifted. Others propose a single catastrophic event. There is speculation that Heracleion was the same as Thonis mentioned in Egyptian texts, meaning two names for one city. A fringe hypothesis wonders if religious taboos kept people from rebuilding. Archaeologists are careful not to overstate, but each artifact hints at life abruptly interrupted by water. That evening on deck, under a canopy of stars, you dream you are walking along a temple colonnade. Bells ring and priests chant. The ground trembles. Water seeps through cracks. As you turn to run, waves crash over the pylons and you are submerged. You wake with damp hair and the taste of brine, feeling the boundary between land and sea blur in your mind. Amelia Earhart, the lost aviator's shadow. The open sky once carried the hum of Amelia Earhart's Lockheed Electra as it traversed oceans and continents. Today you stand on a desolate airstrip in the South Pacific, gazing at an endless expanse of blue that swallowed her flight in 1937. The horizon blurs into clouds. Coconut palms sway behind you, and the sound of waves breaking over coral reefs fills the humid air. Somewhere beyond, perhaps on a reef or in deep water, her final chapter lies hidden. Your interest was piqued by an old radio recording you heard in a museum. A faint woman's voice pleading, "This is Amelia Earhart," followed by static. The curator claimed the distress call came from a shortwave operator days after she disappeared. Something in the voice, a mixture of resolve and exhaustion, lodged in your mind. That night, you booked a passage to the islands near her last known coordinates. The island chain is remote and lush. Frangipani flowers scent the air, and the sand squeaks underfoot. You speak with elders who recall their grandparents hearing a plane and then finding bits of aluminum that washed ashore. In the shallow lagoon sea, turtles glide over coral heads. The water is warm and impossibly clear. A beachcomber hands you a piece of riveted metal he found years ago. It is corroded but manufactured with techniques from the 1930s. The underside bears faded numbers. On your second day while snorkeling near a reef, you spot something unnatural sticking out from the coral, a set of rusted radial engine cylinders. Divers help you excavate further, revealing a debris field partially embedded in the reef. A piece of plexiglass shaped like a cockpit window emerges. Nearby you find a shoe sole with circular cuts consistent with Earhart's custom footwear. The currents feel odd as you search. There is a cold patch of water despite the tropical sea, and your skin prickles as if being watched. Suddenly a squall blows in without warning. Waves pick up, and the reef cuts your leg as you scramble to shore. Wind whips palm fronds and rain stings your face. You think you hear the faint hum of an engine above the storm, though no aircraft are scheduled. For a moment, the clouds part, and you glimpse an old twin-engine silhouette passing overhead before it dissolves like a mirage. The storm moves on as quickly as it arrived, leaving you shaken. That evening, over a lantern, you sort the artifacts with the islanders. Researchers have long theorized that Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan landed on a reef near Nikumaroro and survived for weeks, sending radio calls until the rising tide claimed the plane. Bones found decades ago, initially dismissed, might have belonged to a tall woman. Tygar expeditions recovered freckle cream jars and other relics. You cross-check the rivet patterns on the metal piece and find they match an Electra. Explanations vary. Some believe Earhart was captured by the Japanese and taken to Saipan. Others think she assumed a new identity in the United States after a secret mission. There are also suggestions she was an intelligence agent and her disappearance was covered up. The simplest theory that she crashed and sank remains plausible yet unsatisfying. Every fragment of evidence you hold could fit multiple narratives. As you depart, the islanders wave from the shore. The airplane pieces are left with researchers, but that night you hear a propeller in your dreams. In your mind's eye, you see a woman standing on a reef, shielding her eyes from the sun, scanning the horizon for help. The dream fades, leaving the faint smell of aviation fuel, and the sound of waves reminders that Amelia's story still drifts with the tide. Beaumont Children, Disappearance, 1906. The Summer That Never Ended. Glenelg Beach in Adelaide. Australia is usually filled with families enjoying the sun. On a hot Australia day in 1906, 3 siblings, Jane Arna and Grant Beaumont, vanished. Standing on the same stretch of sand decades later, you hear seagulls squawk and the ocean crash gently against the shore. The breeze carries the scent of sunscreen and salt. Children laugh nearby, yet an undercurrent of sadness lingers in the collective memory of the community. You first heard about the Beaumont case in a true crime podcast. The hosts spoke with empathy and frustration about the unanswered questions. A subsequent trip to Australia presented an opportunity to visit the sites and archives yourself. An old photograph of the children smiling at the beach stuck in your mind, propelling you to board a tram to Glenelg. The suburb of Glenelg is bright and cheerful. Ice cream parlors line Jetty Road and the tram clatters by. You walk past the spot where the children were last seen buying snacks with a £1 note. Locals describe a tall blonde man seen with them. The sun beats down, and the aroma of hot chips makes your stomach rumble. You visit the public library, leafing through old newspapers with headlines screaming "missing." At the archives in Adelaide, you examine police reports. The investigation details dogs tracking the children's scent to a nearby storm drain, then losing it. Witness statements mention a man helping the children pack up their belongings. You find letters sent to the Beaumont parents over the years, some cruel hoaxes, others possibly genuine. One letter demanded ransom, another claimed the children were living happily on an outback farm. The handwriting suggests the same author, but forensic analysis was inconclusive. While speaking with a retired detective at a cafe, you feel a sudden chill despite the heat. A busker on the corner plays a melancholy tune. For a moment, you think you see 3 children running along the shoreline hand in hand. But when you blink, only seagulls flutter above footprints in the sand. The detective confides that he still thinks about the case daily. Theories range widely. Some believe the children were abducted by a pedophile ring. Others suspect they were taken by someone they knew, possibly a neighbor. There are rumors linking the case to later disappearances in the area. A few think the children accidentally drowned and their bodies were swept out to sea. Despite numerous tips and excavations over the years, no conclusive evidence has surfaced. Possible explanations include a chance meeting with a predator, a carefully planned kidnapping, or an opportunistic crime. There's speculation about clandestine tunnels under a nearby factory. The case remains open, but leads have dwindled. The family home was eventually sold. The parents died without answers. As you leave the beach, the afternoon sun casts long shadows. That night, you dream of 3 children on a beach at dusk, laughing as they build a sandcastle. A tall figure approaches, and the sky darkens. You wake to the sound of waves on the shore, and the realization that some summers never truly end for those left behind. Bermuda's Triangle of Lost Souls. The North Atlantic between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico forms a swath of ocean infamous for disappearances. Its water is a rich turquoise, deceptively calm on a clear day. You stand on the deck of a small research vessel scanning the horizon. Stories of planes vanishing mid-flight and ships swallowed without distress calls echo in your mind. The sun glints off gentle waves, belying the unease that comes with traversing the Bermuda Triangle. You were first captivated by the triangle as a child reading tales of Flight 19 and cargo ships that never arrived. Later, while studying maritime navigation, you learned about unusual magnetic variations reported in the area. When offered a berth on a research trip studying ocean currents and anomalies, you seized the chance to see the region firsthand. The ocean here is a paradox. Waters can be glassy, reflecting sky like a mirror, then quickly churn with squalls. Flying fish leap out of the water, and Portuguese man-o'-war float like blue balloons. Instruments on board periodically show small compass deviations. The captain points out patches of seaweed forming parts of the Sargasso Sea, a floating ecosystem. At night, bioluminescent plankton trail behind the vessel, like ghostly sparks. Midway through the voyage, sensors detect an unusual drop in barometric pressure. A storm builds rapidly. Dark clouds tower and water spouts appear. The radar glitches momentarily, showing multiple echoes. The ship pitches as waves rise. You grip the railing, heart racing. The storm roars overhead, then abruptly dissipates, leaving a surreal calm. On the radar, a blip appears and vanishes, possibly a squall, possibly something else. The ship's compass spins briefly before steadying. That evening, you gather with crew members to review logs. The region's history includes the 1945 disappearance of Flight 19, a group of torpedo bombers whose compasses malfunctioned. In 1918, the USS Cyclops vanished with over 300 people aboard. Sailors in the 17th century feared giant waves and shallow reefs. Modern scientists note that methane hydrate eruptions could destabilize water density, causing ships to sink suddenly. There are many hypotheses. Some attribute losses to human error, compounded by swiftly changing weather. Others cite magnetic anomalies and compass variation. Rogue waves, unpredictable and towering, could capsize ships. Ball lightning or electromagnetic fog may disorient pilots. Conspiracy theorists invoke portals, UFOs, or the lost city of Atlantis. No single explanation covers all cases, making the triangle a catch-all for maritime mysteries. The lack of definitive answers fuels speculation. Insurance companies treat the region like any other. Statistically, the number of disappearances may not exceed other heavily traveled seas. Yet, the narrative endures a modern sea monster story. Perhaps it's the combination of unpredictable weather, navigational challenges, and human imagination that creates the triangle's allure. As your ship returns to port, the ocean is calm. That night, you dream of flying over turquoise waters when the instruments go dark, and a whisper calls from below. You wake to the rocking of the ship and the sense that there are still pockets of earth and sea where the unknown thrives. Bigfoot, giant of the woods, towering pines loom over a carpet of moss in the Pacific Northwest. Shafts of sunlight pierce the canopy, illuminating ferns and mushrooms. The forest smells of pine resin and damp earth. You follow a game trail, ears attuned to every rustle. Somewhere in these endless woods, people say a huge, hair-covered creature, Bigfoot, roams, leaving footprints larger than any humans. Your heart quickens, balancing skepticism with anticipation. Your curiosity about Bigfoot was sparked by watching grainy footage of a bipedal figure striding along a creek, Later, you read accounts from loggers and hikers about tall, foul-smelling beings watching them from the trees. When a friend invited you to join a camping trip in a known hot spot, you packed a backpack and a camera ready for whatever might appear. The forest is alive with sounds. Birds call, squirrels chatter, and a distant creek babbles. You set up camp near a grove of cedars. Around the fire, a local recounts hearing whoops and knocks at night, possibly communication. You walk to a muddy creek bank the next morning and find an imprint 5 toes 17 inches long, sunk deep. The track's depth suggests great weight. A skunk-like odor hangs in the still air. That afternoon, you place audio recorders and motion sensor cameras. Hiking deeper, you notice branches broken at unusual heights and small conical structures of sticks. At dusk, the forest changes. The usual animal noises quiet. An eerie silence descends. Then from across a ravine comes a howl, not wolf, not human, long and mournful. You feel the hairs on your neck rise. The sound is followed by a knock, as if someone struck a tree with a club. As night falls, the darkness feels thick. Around the fire, your group hears heavy footsteps circling just out of sight. Something large exudes a musky smell. A rock lands near the fire pit thrown from the darkness. You glimpse a tall shadow between trees, then it's gone. Your heartbeat pounds in your ears as adrenaline surges. The forest remains still, save for your breathing. In the morning, you retrieve the recorders. The audio captured knocks and howls similar to what you heard. The motion camera recorded a dark blur and the snap of a branch. Over breakfast, you review historical reports, Native American legends of Sasquatch, a wild man of the woods. 19th century newspapers mention gorilla-like creatures. Modern analyses of hair samples often reveal bear or human DNA, though some remain inconclusive. Explanations vary. Some scientists consider Bigfoot a combination of misidentified bears, hoaxes, and cultural mythology. Cryptozoologists argue it could be a relict hominoid like Gigantopithecus. There's also speculation about interdimensional beings or government experiments. Each theory reflects different worldviews, from scientific skepticism to yearning for mystery. As you hike out, rain begins to fall softly. That night, you dream of a massive figure watching from behind a tree, eyes reflecting your campfire. In the dream, you feel no fear, only curiosity. You wake to birdsong and realize the forest still holds secrets, not just about mythical creatures, but about our own need for wonder. Akhenaten's strange disappearance. The vanished heretic dust swirls in the late afternoon light as you stand before the ruins of Amarna, the short-lived capital carved from desert during Akhenaten's reign. Broken columns and tumbled walls hint at a radical experiment long abandoned. The river Nile glints in the distance, but here the air feels static, as if time itself hesitated. Statues of the pharaoh with elongated features lie toppled, their serene smiles half buried. You can almost hear the echoes of Aten hymns, faint and haunting, floating above the sand. Your journey began with a cryptic postcard delivered with no return address. It depicted a relief of Akhenaten and Nefertiti worshipping the Aten, but scribbled on the back was "Find where he went after the sun set." The postcard smelled faintly of old papyrus and desert wind. Intrigued and drawn by the challenge, you found yourself on a train bound for Middle Egypt, chasing the footsteps of a vanished king. Amarna's landscape is nothing like the lush temples of Thebes. The city was built quickly, intentionally different, with wide boulevards and open courts to bathe in sunlight. Now, tumbled mud brick walls stand like broken teeth. The chalky dust gets into your shoes and throat. Piles of smashed talatot blocks bear the unmistakable art style of Akhenaten, fluid, intimate scenes of his family. Birds flit through hollow windows, and the scent of sun-baked clay mixes with the faint fragrance of crushed herbs from a nearby excavation camp. You wander into a house once reserved for priests, drawn by a low doorway leading into a cool room. In a corner, something glints. It's a small gold seal stamped with the Atene's rays. The floor shows signs of being disturbed recently, and you notice a faint path of footprints leading toward a sealed shaft. When you lean over, you feel cool air rising from below, carrying the smell of damp earth and something metallic. A soft scraping noise echoes up from the darkness. Suddenly, sand begins to trickle down from the ceiling, and the shaft seems to groan. Your heart races as you realize the ground might give way. In a panic, you back away, but the room begins to tilt in your perception. Your ears ring with a high-pitched tone. Outside, the wind picks up, carrying a chorus of whispers that sound almost like chanting. For a moment, you think you see a figure with a distinctive long headpiece disappear behind a crumbling wall. When you give chase, the figure has vanished, leaving only shifting dunes. Shaken, you retreat to the excavation camp. That night, you pore over journals of early explorers who described similar shafts that led to unfinished tombs. One document recounts rumors that Akhenaten did not die in Thebes, but was secretly moved, his body hidden away by loyal followers to escape desecration. Another suggests that he fled south, assuming another identity. None of the mummies examined so far fit his unique appearance. Some scholars argue Akhenaten was buried in a hidden chamber in Amarna itself, disguised under a commoner's house. Others think he was returned to Thebes quietly and rewrapped with different funerary texts to appease the priests. There are also wild theories that he traveled east, taking the Aten cult with him, influencing other religions. Each possibility offers an explanation, but no proof, leaving the question open like the desert horizon. On your last evening at Amarna, as the sunset bleeds red across the cliffs, you think you see a shadow kneeling in prayer among the ruins. When you blink, it's gone. That night, you dream of a hidden tomb lined with unusual hymns to the sun disk of a long-fingered hand pointing you onward. You wake with an impression of warmth on your face, as if someone had placed a sun amulet on your forehead. The mystery lingers like the afterglow of sunset. Black Dahlia, 1947. A city's beauty and darkness, Los Angeles in the late 1940s was a city of glamour and grit. Neon signs flickered over bustling boulevards. In January 1947, an aspiring actress named Elizabeth Short was found murdered in a vacant lot, her body mutilated in a way that shocked even hardened detectives. You stand at the site now, a suburban block, listening to the distant hum of traffic. The sky is clear, but an undercurrent of unease lingers, as if the ground remembers. You first learned about the Black Dahlia case through a noir film referencing it. Later, true crime books describe the brutality of the crime and the subsequent media frenzy. The case file remained open but unsolved. When an exhibition of crime scene photography came to town, you attended, and the stark images propelled you to research further. Los Angeles is sprawling and diverse. Palms line the streets. Hillsides glow at sunset. You visit the Downtown Police Museum, where a display contains the Black Dahlia case file. Newspaper clippings scream lurid headlines. Photographs depict a smiling Elizabeth with dark hair and flowers behind her ear. Witness statements fill pages. The smell of old paper and cigarette smoke pervades the room, a relic of another era. In the archives, you pore over suspect lists. Doctors, actors, and drifters were questioned, letters sent to newspapers signed, Black Dahlia Avenger taunted police. You examine a doctor's medical instruments found near the scene. A note in one file mentions a neighbor hearing a car door slam in the early hours. As you flip through photos, a janitor walks by whistling a song from the 1940s. You glance up, and for a moment, his shadow on the wall looks like a tall man in a fedora. One night, while driving along South Norton Avenue, the street where the body was found, you feel a sudden chill despite the warm evening. Streetlights cast long shadows. For a second, the corner of your eye catches a figure standing near a hedge, watching. When you turn, there is nothing but a street lamp buzzing. You drive away, heart pounding, the case's horror, suddenly close. Back home, you read theories. Some point to a surgeon with connections to the city's elite capable of the precise cuts observed. Others implicate a Hollywood producer with a dark secret. There are suggestions of mob involvement, a disgruntled lover, or an unknown serial killer. A retired detective wrote a memoir accusing his own father. Forensic advancements have tested evidence for DNA, but results are inconclusive. Explanations fail to satisfy. The case sits at the intersection of misogyny, media, sensationalism, and post-war Los Angeles's underbelly. It continues to attract amateur sleuths and writers searching for resolution. The image of the Dahlia smiling with hope contrasts sharply with the violence she suffered, reinforcing the mystery's hold on the public imagination. That night, you dream in black and white. You walk down dimly lit streets with jazz playing faintly. A woman in a dark dress turns a corner and disappears. You wake to early morning light, and the feeling that some mysteries reflect more about society than the identity of a single killer. Collapse of Egypt's Old Kingdom. When pyramids could not save a nation. The Old Kingdom of Egypt, the age of pyramid builders, lasted nearly 5 centuries before crumbling around 200 BCE. You stand on the Giza Plateau gazing at the Great Pyramid, its massive stones glowing in the morning light. Behind you stretches the desert, while across the Nile fertile fields shimmer. The air is dry and tinged with the scent of sun-baked stone. The question looms, how could such a powerful state collapse? Your fascination with this decline began in a university course on ancient civilizations. A lecture about the First Intermediate Period described famine chaos and rulers reduced to local chiefs. The professor displayed a tomb inscription, lamenting the Nile was empty, and people ate their children. That line haunted you. Years later, you return to Egypt to read inscriptions yourself, and to stand where kings once commanded resources to move mountains. The scene is serene today. Camels rest beside their handlers. Vendors sell scarab trinkets. Yet the pyramids speak of vast organization. You tour the tomb of a vizier where reliefs depict boats loaded with grain and scribes recording tallies. A nearby shaft yields papyri listing laborers' rations. The system seems robust, but further south, at the site of elephantine nilometers carved into rock, show extremely low flood levels around the time of the collapse. In Aswan, you study texts inscribed on stelae. One records 7 consecutive years of low Nile floods leading to crop failures. Another describes central authority failing to send grain to provinces. Archaeologists uncover mass graves and skeletons showing signs of malnutrition. Oases depict local governors seizing power. In the tomb of Anktifi, a provincial ruler, he boasts of feeding his people while neighboring nomes starved. The once unified state fractured. At night in your hotel, a sandstorm blows in rattling windows and filling the air with grit. The lights flicker. You imagine communities stranded without shipments, famine swirling like a storm. The storm passes, leaving the city coated in dust. Your throat is dry and you taste the desert. You think of ancient Egyptians watching floodwaters fail to rise and feeling similar dread. Back in Cairo, you read academic papers. Climate data from lake sediments indicate a sudden drying of East Africa around 200 BC, part of a broader Old World drought. Government budgets strained by pyramid building may have depleted reserves. Political power structures reliant on the divine king may have eroded when famine undermined faith. Low Nile floods could have been exacerbated by volcanic eruptions altering monsoon patterns. Combined stresses likely overwhelm the centralized system. Theories converge and diverge. Some emphasize climate change, others focus on internal class conflict, with laborers revolting after decades of state projects. There are suggestions that regional leaders seized the moment to assert independence. A fringe idea even speculates on pest outbreaks or disease. The collapse was likely multifaceted, a cascade of failures rather than a single cause. As you watch the sunset turn the pyramids orange, you reflect on the impermanence of even the mightiest structures. That night you dream of the Nile receding and of farmers staring at cracked earth. You wake with gratitude for modern resilience and a renewed awareness that environmental shifts can topple societies as surely as armies can. The old kingdom's fall whispers across millennia, a cautionary tale carved in stone and silt. Egypt's vanished underground labyrinth, the lost maze of Mendet. Greek historian Herodotus wrote of a grand underground labyrinth near the ancient city of Crocodilopolis in Egypt. He claimed it contained 3,000 chambers filled with hieroglyphs and reliefs. Modern archaeologists have never found such a complex. You stand in the Fayum region near the pyramids of Hawara, feeling the midday heat bake the desert. The sand stretches in all directions, hiding what may lie beneath. Your interest in the labyrinth grew after reading Herodotus's description. I saw this with my own eyes, a work surpassing the pyramids. Later, Roman writers confirmed its existence. Yet excavations have revealed only remains of a mortuary temple. When a geophysical survey of the area detected anomalies, rumors of a buried complex reignited, prompting you to visit. The landscape is stark. A few date palms cast sparse shade. The air smells of dust and Nile mud. Archaeologists have dug trenches revealing mud brick walls and columns from Amenhotep's pyramid complex. You peer into a square hole where water seeps up, making the ground treacherous. Local farmers recall stories of their grandparents finding carved stones when digging wells. A faint breeze carries the scent of reeds from the nearby lake. At the edge of the site, a researcher shows you ground-penetrating radar images. Patterns suggest voids beneath the sand, possibly tunnels or chambers. You watch as a probe is lowered into a well. The rope grows taut, then slackens as it touches water. When the probe is pulled back up, it brings fragments of polished limestone. Under magnification, the pieces show incised lines as if part of an inscription. Your pulse quickens, evidence of something man-made below. Suddenly, the wind picks up, blowing sand into your eyes. A dust devil spins across the site, scattering papers and tools. Workers scramble to cover equipment. In the chaos, you glimpse a rectangular depression in the sand. You hadn't noticed its edges too regular to be natural. When you mention it to the team, they mark it for future excavation. The storm passes, leaving ripples on the dunes like waves on a sea of sand. Later, over tea in a nearby village, you discuss findings. Some scholars argue the labyrinth was a metaphor or an exaggeration by Herodotus. Others think it lies destroyed, its stones quarried by later builders. A few believe it still exists, flooded by rising groundwater. The Hawara pyramid's substructure is complex with multiple passages and hidden chambers. Satellite imagery hints at rectangular outlines buried deeper. Theories about the labyrinth's purpose include a monumental administrative center, a ceremonial maze for initiations, or a giant tomb complex. Some link it to the myth of the Minotaur, suggesting cultural exchange. Fringe theories describe it as a repository of ancient knowledge sealed to protect secrets. Without excavation, these remain speculation. That night, you dream of walking through endless corridors lit by oil lamps. Walls are covered in scenes of kings and gods. The air is cool and smells of stone and water. Every turn reveals more passages. You wake with sand in your hair and the feeling that some labyrinths exist both in the earth and in the imagination, waiting for those who dare to find them. Cave Tomb of Confusion. The mysterious mummy of Amarna. Deep within Egypt's Valley of the Kings lies a tomb catalogued as KV-5. Discovered in 1907, it contained a single badly decayed mummy in a hastily prepared coffin, along with artifacts bearing names of Akhenaten and Kia. The tomb seemed to mix funerary goods from different people, confusing generations of Egyptologists. You walk down the modern metal stairs into the narrow corridor, the air cool and dusty. The limestone walls are undecorated, as if the burial was hurried. A faint odor of ancient resin lingers. Your involvement began when you read a research paper that used DNA analysis to link the KV-5 mummy to Tutankhamun as his father. Another article argued that the bones were those of a young man, possibly Smenkhkare. The contradictions intrigued you. When a conservation team offered tours of the tomb to raise funds, you signed up eager to see the evidence firsthand and feel the space where history's puzzle lay. Inside the burial chamber, a reconstructed coffin lies open. Its gilded panels are damaged. The face mask is missing. Nearby, a set of shrines originally meant for Queen Tia's burial are stacked, their inscriptions chipped. You notice that some spells in the coffin texts are scratched out as if someone tried to remove names. A broken magic brick with Akhenaten's name rests in a niche. The mismatched items give the room an unsettled energy. Examining a pillar base, you find a faint ink inscription referencing year 3 of Tutankhamun's reign, suggesting that this was a secondary burial. As you lean in, a gust of wind seems to arise from the shaft, carrying a sweet smell like lotus. Your flashlight flickers. For a moment, you feel as if someone is standing behind you, but when you turn, the room is empty. Sweat beads on your forehead despite the cool air. Back outside, the desert sun feels blinding. You review notes in the shade of a rock. An Egyptologist points out that the skull's sutures indicate an individual around 35 years old, matching Akhenaten's estimated age. However, the pelvis suggests a younger man. DNA studies show the mummy is Tutankhamun's father, but mitochondrial DNA could also fit Smenkhkare, whose history is murky. The coffin's inscriptions may have been altered, pointing to political motives behind the reburial. Later, in a Luxor library, you consult old excavation diaries. Theodore Davis, who funded the dig, initially believed he had found Akhenaten. Howard Carter disagreed. The mummy's posture was unusual. The arms were at the sides rather than crossed. Radiocarbon dating places the burial within a decade of the Amarna period. Each piece of data seems to answer one question and raise another. Theories range widely. Many modern scholars now lean toward Akhenaten as the occupant reburied by Tutankhamun to legitimize his own reign. Others argue the mix of artifacts suggests Smenkhkare, a co-regent who disappeared from records. A minority proposed the tomb was a cache for multiple royal items moved hastily to protect them from tomb robbers. The political chaos following Akhenaten's religious reforms adds layers to the puzzle. That night, you dream of a body being carried through desert twilight. Priests whisper prayers, their torches flickering. Names are spoken and erased masks swapped. The procession slips into a hidden valley. You wake with the sense that identity can be as fragile as papyrus, and that sometimes ambiguity is intentionally preserved to guard secrets. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 Mavri, vanishing into thin air. On March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, carrying 239 people, took off from Kuala Lumpur en route to Beijing and never arrived. The disappearance of the Boeing 7 sparked a global search across oceans and mines. You stand at a memorial near Kuala Lumpur International Airport. A wall engraved with names reflects sunlight. Families leave flowers and folded cranes. The air is heavy with humidity and grief. Planes roar overhead, and each takeoff feels like a leap of faith. Your interest began when you watched live news coverage of the search. A relative worked in aviation and talked about radar satellite handshakes and flight paths. You followed updates, obsessively reading reports from the Australian Transport Safety Bureau and Inmarsat data analyses. When a small memorial museum opened in Tuolani, you visited to pay respects and to understand the human side of the tragedy. The museum displays pieces of debris washed ashore on Réunion Island and Africa's east coast. A wing flaperon lies behind glass, its barnacles removed. A map traces Flight 370's final known arc over the southern Indian Ocean. You see photographs of the passengers smiling, families, business travelers, students, personal belongings, a backpack. A boarding pass are laid out carefully. The smell of polished wood and air conditioning fills the space. Interactive exhibits explain how the plane's transponder stopped transmitting and military radar tracked it, turning west across the Malay Peninsula. Satellite pings known as handshakes indicate the plane flew for hours before disappearing. In one video, investigators discuss possible routes and fuel calculations. Watching the simulations, you feel a sinking sensation as if following a ghost path across endless waves. Standing before a digital display of the Southern Ocean search area, you press a button to overlay search phases. The area is immense, the ocean depths unfathomable. An oceanographer explains that currents could carry debris thousands of miles. As you listen, the lights dim, and a low hum of recorded underwater signals plays. The room feels like the inside of a cockpit at night, instruments glowing faintly. Later reading official reports, you learn that investigators considered a controlled ditching, a cockpit fire hijacking, and pilot suicide. The autopilot may have flown until fuel exhaustion. Pieces of wing and cabin found over years were analyzed for clues. Data from the Inmarsat satellite suggests the plane turned south. The main wreckage, however, remains undiscovered. The search has been suspended, but could resume if new evidence emerges. Theories abound. Some argue the captain deliberately diverted the plane. Others suggest a sudden decompression incapacitated everyone. There are suggestions of hijacking gone wrong or cargo catching fire. A fringe theory posits that the plane was taken to a remote airstrip. Each scenario leaves questions unanswered. Families of the missing oscillate between hope and despair, their lives on hold. That night, you dream of flying over an infinite blue expanse. The sun sets, painting the sky orange. Your instruments flicker and go dark. You feel weightless, then nothing. You wake with tears in your eyes and a sense of the void the families feel. MM370 remains a wound in the sky, a reminder of how vast the world is and how small we are within it. Mystery of the Saqqara sarcophagi, colorful coffins and questions. At the ancient necropolis of Saqqara south of Cairo, archaeologists have recently unearthed dozens of wooden sarcophagi stacked in shafts. Painted in vivid blues, reds, and golds, the coffins look as if they were buried yesterday, despite being over 2,500 years old. You descend a wooden staircase into one of these shafts, the air cool and heavy with the scent of incense and dust. Flickering lights reveal rows of faces painted on coffin lids, eyes outlined with kohl, serene and otherworldly. Your interest was sparked by watching the Netflix documentary Secrets of the Saqqara Tomb, which followed the discovery of a family tomb. A news article later reported on the excavation of more than 100 coffins in 20. Archaeologists appeared almost overwhelmed by the abundance. When an opportunity arose to volunteer at the site through a university program, You applied, eager to help catalog the finds and experience the thrill of discovery. The shaft is deep with narrow ledges built into the walls for coffins. Each sarcophagus is unique, adorned with hieroglyphs and depictions of deities. The colors are preserved thanks to the dry sand and resin coatings. You gently brush sand from a lid to reveal a depiction of the goddess Nut stretching across the sky. The wood creaks slightly, as if exhaling. The silence in the chamber is thick. As you assist a conservator, you notice that some coffins bear the names of high priests of the 26th dynasty, while others belong to middle-class individuals. The mixing suggests the shaft was reused over generations. In one corner, you find a small statue of the god Ta-Sokar Osiris wrapped in linen. A faint whiff of resin and cedar sar emerges as you handle it. Your hands tremble slightly at the thought of disturbing someone's eternal rest. Suddenly, a muffled thud echoes from above as if something heavy fell. Dust rains down. The lights flicker. For a second, you imagine hearing whispering. Everyone freezes, listening. The moment passes and work resumes. The tension underscores the delicacy of working in such an environment where any misstep could damage artifacts or trigger collapses. Back at camp, you read about the mystery surrounding the sheer number of coffins. Some scholars suggest a surge in burials occurred when Saqqara became a major pilgrimage site during the late period. Others propose that plagues or economic changes led to mass interments. A papyrus fragment mentions a tax on mummification, hinting at commercialization of death. CT scans reveal that some coffins contain multiple mummified bodies, possibly family members. Theories about why the coffins were so well preserved include the sealing of shafts with limestone blocks, the use of antimicrobial resins, and the dry microclimate. Some fringe ideas speculate that the priests used secret chemicals lost to time. The quantity of coffins raises questions about social hierarchies and burial practices. Were these people buried hastily, or was this an organized necropolis? Each answer leads to another question. That night, you dream of painted faces watching from the edges of your vision. They whisper ancient spells as you float down a shaft, light fading. You wake with the impression of blue and gold patterns and the realization that even in death, these individuals command attention and inspire wonder. Nazca Lines. Messages in the desert. On a high plateau in southern Peru, enormous geoglyphs etched into the desert depict animals, plants, and geometric designs. Known as the Nazca Lines, they are so large that they can only be fully appreciated from the air. You stand on a viewing tower overlooking part of the plain. The sun is intense, and heat radiates from the ground. The dry air smells of dust and minerals. Below, a spiral design unfurls across the arid surface, its grooves pale against darker gravel. Your fascination with the Nazca Lines began when you saw aerial photos of a giant hummingbird and spider carved into the earth. Later, you read about theories ranging from astronomical calendars to ritual walkways. You booked a small plane flight over the plateau, excited and a little apprehensive about the tiny aircraft. From the air, the scale of the lines is astonishing. The hummingbird measures over 90 meters long. The plane banks so both sides can view. You see the monkey with its spiral tail, the condor with outstretched wings, and many straight lines that run for kilometers arrow straight. Some lines intersect, forming trapezoids and triangles. The landscape below looks like a parchment on which giants scribbled. On the ground later, you walk along one of the lines. It is a shallow trench about 10 centimeters deep, and a meter wide, cleared of dark stones to reveal lighter soil beneath. Walking along it, you feel like part of a procession. The desert is silent except for the wind. Small cairns of stones dot the area. You bend down and pick up a stone, noticing it is coated with a dark patina from centuries of exposure. A dust devil sweeps across the plain, temporarily erasing footprints. The wind whips your hat. For a moment, you lose your sense of orientation among the geometric patterns. The heat distorts the horizon. A condor soars overhead, mirroring the geoglyph below. You feel both grounded and disoriented in this landscape of human and natural lines. In a nearby museum, you examine pottery shards painted with similar designs. Researchers explain that the Nazca people likely created the lines between 500 BCE and 500 CE. Some lines align with solstice sunrises, supporting the calendar theory. Others connect to ceremonial centers, suggesting pilgrimage routes. Underground aqueducts called puquillos supply water, and some lines seem to radiate from these. The dry climate has preserved the geoglyphs remarkably. Theories abound. Some see the figures as offerings to deities who controlled rainfall. Others propose giant looms for making textiles. Fringe theories invoke extraterrestrials or ancient runways. Experimental archaeologists have recreated lines using simple surveying tools and ropes, showing that large labor forces were not necessary. The mystery lies more in purpose than in technique. That night in a desert lodge, you dream of walking along glowing lines under a starry sky. Each step hums with energy. Figures rise from the ground illuminated in gold, then lay back down. You wake with dust in your throat and a sense that the Nazca Lines are messages written to the sky and those patient enough to view them from above. Philadelphia Experiment. Warped metal and vanished men. You grew up in the shadow of the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, your childhood filled with the deep clang of metal and the smell of oil. Decades later, you work as a freelance science writer, chasing stories that straddle the edge between fact and fringe. One autumn afternoon, a faded blue envelope arrives in your mailbox. Inside is an old photograph of the destroyer USS Eldridge and a handwritten note. They made us invisible. We never came back the same. It's unsigned, but a smudge of soot on the corner smells of diesel and ozone. That night, you can't sleep imagining sailors shimmering out of existence in a harbor you once rode past on your bike. You decide to investigate what really happened during the so-called Philadelphia Experiment of 1943. You find the return address of the envelope leads to an assisted living facility in New Jersey. The sender is a man named Thomas, a retired electrician's mate. When you visit, he speaks in a raspy whisper. He recounts an experiment gone wrong of green fog enveloping the Eldridge and the ship flickering like a candle about to go out. He claims he saw crewmen fused to metal bulkheads when the fog lifted their bodies, distorted as if matter and machine had blended. He shoves a small brass dial into your hand. From the deck, he says, closing your fingers over it. His urgency hooks you. Why would an old sailor carry such memories if there was nothing there? You promise to look through archival records, newspaper clippings, and declassified memos, feeling a responsibility to his story. During World War II, the U.S. Navy sought any advantage to protect convoys from German U-boats. One area of research focused on degaussing ships to avoid magnetic mines. Conspiracy theorists later claim the Navy attempted something far more radical, rendering a ship invisible to radar or even to the naked eye by manipulating electromagnetic fields. The legend holds that on a late October day in 1943, the USS Eldridge was fitted with generators and coils, then enveloped in a field that caused it to vanish from its berth and reappear in Norfolk, Virginia, before returning to Philadelphia. Official Navy histories insist that no such experiment occurred and that the Eldridge was never in Philadelphia at the time. In microfilm archives, you find press releases about routine trials, but the pages you're most interested in are blank torn or redacted. A sense of suppression lingers like dust. Your research leads you to interview a physicist who worked on naval projects during the war. He laughs at talk of teleportation, but admits that early radar stealth tests produced unexpected effects, statically charged decks, causing crew's hair to stand on end, arcs of blue fire dancing along railings in humid weather. You track down dock logs from Norfolk, showing that on the day in question, the Eldridge indeed passed through the area. The times, however, don't align neatly with official records. In a dusty second-hand bookstore, you stumble upon a diary kept by an onshore watchman. His entry for October 28th mentions a blinding green glow above the harbor and men screaming as if far away. He describes one sailor stumbling ashore disoriented, claiming to have been stuck half in and half out of the deck plates. The watchman writes that military police confiscated his diary a day later. How did this copy escape? The discovery both intrigues and unnerves you. As you dig deeper, you find yourself receiving anonymous emails warning you to stop. Someone leaves a file on your car windshield containing a list of names of sailors who died in training accidents around the same time. One night you wake to your smoke alarm shrilling. The brass dial Thomas gave you sits on your bedside table, glowing faintly green in the dark. You pick it up and feel a low vibration like the hum of a generator through steel. The next day, your computer hard drive fails. Months of notes vanish. These events could be chalked up to coincidence and paranoia, but you can't shake the sensation of being observed. You dream of standing on a ship's deck as waves of light roll over you, body flickering. In the dream, you try to move, but your limbs merge into the steel, your scream swallowed by the ship. Back in Thomas's room, you ask him why he sent the note now. He whispers that his shipmates were sworn to secrecy, threatened with court-martial if they spoke. Many died with the story. He felt compelled to unburden himself before his time came. You show him the diary entry, and he nods. You later speak with a naval historian who reminds you of Occam's razor wartime accidents and folklore combined to create a legend. He points out that after the war, a merchant seaman named Carl Allen wrote letters to a UFO researcher, claiming to have witnessed the experiment, likely embellishing events to impress. Yet, you counter legends often start with a kernel of truth. The science of electromagnetic fields is complex. Small miscalculations could produce lethal arcs or strange optical effects. Even if the Eldridge didn't teleport, could a poorly shielded generator have created static discharges and hallucinations? The line between truth and exaggeration blurs like the horizon on a foggy sea. One theory suggests that the vanishing was actually a byproduct of degaussing experiments combined with a temperature inversion that caused light to bend around the ship, making it appear indistinct. Another posits that sailors exposed to strong electromagnetic fields suffered transient neurological symptoms, leading to disorientation and later embellishments about teleportation. A fringe group insists that Einstein's unified field theory was secretly tested briefly opening a portal. They cite unsourced memos about Project Rainbow. Skeptics argue that Carl Allen was a fabulist and that the Eldridge's timeline proves it never visited Philadelphia. The truth may be a tangle of misremembered trials rumor and the human brain's tendency to fill gaps with narrative. A week after Thomas passes away, you receive another envelope with no return address. Inside is a photograph of a young sailor standing proudly on the deck of the Eldridge. On the back is scrawled, "We were there, remember us." Along with the photo is a set of coordinates in the Delaware River. At low tide, you take a small boat out and drop a weighted line. The depth finder flickers, then blanks, then returns. For a moment, you imagine an unseen hull just out of phase with reality. A ghost ship existing a fraction of a second from your own world. You pull the brass dial from your pocket. It hums softly. Whether the Philadelphia experiment happened, as legend says, it has burrowed into the culture, an invisible ship casting a shadow you can almost feel. You look across the water and think about how some stories are experiments in themselves, warping perception long after the equipment is powered down. Queen Ankhesenamun's unknown fate, echoes of a pharaoh's bride. As a graduate student in Egyptology, you have spent endless hours leaning over hieroglyphs in dimly lit archives. Your thesis advisor once joked that your tan would come from lamplight instead of sun. One rainy afternoon in Cairo's Egyptian Museum, while cataloging old correspondences, you come across a brittle papyrus tucked inside a forgotten drawer. Its text features a queen begging the Hittite king for a husband, because her husband the pharaoh has died and she has no sons. The letter's tone is desperate yet regal. Many scholars believe it to have been written by Ankhesenamun, widow of Tutankhamun, but the mystery of her life after his death remains. The note seems to call to you personally, pleading for her story to be told. You decide to follow the faint footprints she left through history. Why did a queen who had been married to the boy king write to a foreign enemy seeking a husband? And what became of her after? The question fascinates you because it merges human emotion with the high politics of New Kingdom Egypt. During a guest lecture, an older archaeologist mentions a set of rings found in an antiquity shop in Luxor, engraved with the cartouches of Ankhesenamun and a mysterious pharaoh named Ai. He suggests that Ankhesenamun was forced into marriage with Ai to legitimize his claim to the throne. You feel a surge of indignation on her behalf. Determined to trace her final steps, you secure a grant to join a dig in the Valley of the Kings near a set of unexplored chambers whose radar scans hint at hidden voids. You hope to find a burial that can answer centuries-old questions. Ankhesenamun was born into turmoil, the daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti during a time of religious revolution. She married her half-brother Tutankhamun when both were teenagers. After his sudden death around age 19, she disappears from most official records. Some clues suggest she corresponded with the Hittites, offering herself in marriage to secure a powerful ally, an unprecedented request for an Egyptian queen. The prince sent by the Hittite king was reportedly murdered on the border. Ankhesenamun's name was then paired with eyes on artifacts hinting at a union of convenience. Her tomb has never been conclusively identified. Scholars debate whether she lies in a hidden chamber adjacent to Tutankhamun's tomb, or was buried elsewhere under a different name. The dryness of the desert has preserved many secrets, but sand and rock also keep them jealously. Your team excavates a series of shafts near KV 62 Tutankhamun's tomb. In the oppressive heat of July, sand lifts like talcum powder with each stroke of your brush. After weeks of slow progress, you uncover a limestone doorway sealed with mud bricks, stamped with the royal Necropolis stamp. When the door is pried open, a corridor appears painted with faded images of lotus flowers and protective deities. Inside the chamber lies a gilded shrine, similar in style to those of the 18th dynasty. The sarcophagus within is intact, but the cartouche on its lid has been chiseled away, a deliberate erasure. You feel your heart hammering as the lid is lifted. Inside, the mummy's arms are crossed in royal pose. The body is that of a woman slender and around 5 feet 6. She wears jewelry you recognize from Amarna period art. Yet without a cartouche or inscriptions, definitive identification is elusive. DNA testing later reveals she shares genetic markers with Tutankhamun. Could this be Ankhesenamun news of the discovery leaks, and before the team can properly document the tomb looters' attempt to break in? One night, you and 2 guards hear shuffling at the entrance and catch a glimpse of flashlight beams bouncing off rock. You shout and give chase through narrow wadi paths until the intruders scatter into the dark. The incident heightens pressure from Egypt's Antiquities Authority to either seal the site or reveal its contents publicly. Meanwhile, analysis of the artifacts suggests the burial was hastily assembled. Some items bear the name of I and others of Tutankhamun. The mixture fuels controversy. Sensational headlines proclaim that Akhenaten has been found, but some colleagues caution that the genetic evidence is circumstantial. The more public interest grows, the more you worry that politics will override careful scholarship. Your notes overflow with questions you cannot yet answer. While awaiting further test results, you immerse yourself in letters and murals. You realize Akhenaten's story is in many ways that of women in power throughout history, navigating alliances, marriages, and survival in patriarchal systems. Her plea to the Hittite king reads like an act of agency, yet her possible marriage to I suggests limited options. The erasure of her name on the sarcophagus lid implies that later rulers wished to erase her, or perhaps reuse her burial for a favored relative. In the museum's quiet, you run your fingers along the engraved image of a queen offering offerings to a goddess, and you feel a kinship. Her face looks serene, but her life must have been marked by fear and resilience. Whether or not the mummy is hers, the find underscores how easily someone so powerful can slip from record, leaving behind only clues and questions. Some scholars argue that Akhenaten was killed before she could marry the Hittite prince, possibly orchestrated by I, who sought the throne. Others think she married I but died soon after her burial, intentionally hidden to prevent her tomb from being robbed. A fringe theory suggests she escaped Egypt altogether, living out her days anonymously in a foreign court. Genetic analyses hint that a mummy known as KV-21A, found earlier, could be Tutankhamun's wife, based on lineage markers. The new discovery may belong to another royal female from the same period, such as a daughter of A. The mysteries multiply rather than diminish. You note how often absence of evidence births speculation as people project narratives onto gaps. Months after the discovery, the tomb is closed again to await further study. You return to your university, your suitcase heavier with books, and your mind with possibilities. At your desk, you re-examine the plea from the Hittite letter. You picture a young queen writing it by lamplight, her hand shaking. You wonder whether she ever received a reply. Sometimes late at night, you think you hear her voice, soft as papyrus rustling, "Remember me." You make a note to propose a seminar on forgotten royal women. Akhenaten's fate remains unknown, but her faint signature across time has pulled you into her story, making her more than a footnote. Somewhere under sand or behind a wall, perhaps her name still lies intact, waiting to tell the end of her tale. Secrets beneath the Great Sphinx, hidden chambers and whispers. You are an acoustic engineer who has spent years studying how vibrations travel through rock. One evening, you attend a lecture at a university in Cairo, where a geophysicist presents seismic data, suggesting voids beneath the Great Sphinx. During the Q&A, he mentions anomalies, a hollow area beneath the pause, perhaps a chamber. The official line is that no such space exists. After the talk, he slips you a thumb drive containing raw data and says, "See what you can make of this." Your curiosity ignited, you begin analyzing the frequencies, looking for echoes that indicate cavities. Late at night, you listen to recordings of seismic waves and imagine ancient corridors carved under the sands of Giza, waiting to be discovered. You want to know whether there are indeed rooms beneath the Sphinx, perhaps hiding texts or treasures. Legends mention the Hall of Records, a library of knowledge from a lost civilization, supposedly sealed under the pause. Archaeologists dismiss this as myth, but the seismic anomalies are compelling. You decide to join an independent team of researchers planning to conduct a ground-penetrating radar GPR survey around the Sphinx under the guise of routine maintenance checks. The risk of being caught circumventing Egypt's strict antiquities regulations is high, But the lure of potentially rewriting history draws you in. You calibrate your equipment plan, the survey pattern, and pray you don't attract unwanted attention. The Great Sphinx is one of the most iconic monuments in the world, carved from bedrock on the Giza Plateau. Though much studied, the area around and beneath it remains partially unexplored due to governmental restrictions aimed at preventing damage. In the 1980s, a team conducted a seismic survey that hinted at cavities under the monument. Egyptian authorities later denied the significance of the findings. Legends inspired by Edgar Cayce speak of a hall of records containing knowledge from Atlantis hidden beneath the Sphinx. The Sphinx's own builders left no texts about their methods or intentions. This combination of incomplete knowledge and mystical speculation provides fertile ground for rumors. Conventional archaeologists warn against pseudo-history, yet curiosity persists. During the survey, you and your team discreetly wheel a GPR device near the Sphinx at dawn when tourist traffic is minimal. The machine sends microwave pulses into the ground and listens for reflections. As the data streams in, you see anomalies, linear discontinuities, and voids at depths of a few meters. One particularly strong reflection suggests an empty space directly under the Sphinx's right paw. Another appears deeper beneath the chest. The shapes are rectangular. Your heart races. The raw data alone cannot indicate whether these are natural fissures, ancient tunnels, or modern repairs. But combined with the earlier seismic data, the case grows stronger that something man-made lies below. You whisper excitedly to your colleague. Suddenly, a security guard approaches. You freeze. He frowns at your equipment. You pretend to be calibrating for restoration work. He eyes you for a moment, then moves on. Relief floods you, but you know the clock is ticking. After the survey, you attempt to share the findings with archaeologists. Most react skeptically. A prominent Egyptologist accuses your team of sensationalism, warning that claiming hidden chambers attracts conspiracy theorists and undermines conservation efforts. The Antiquities Ministry calls your permit into question, threatening to ban you from future work on the plateau. Meanwhile, a tabloid runs a headline: "Secret Rooms Under Sphinx Proof of Lost Civilization." You are contacted by a man claiming to represent a private foundation willing to fund an excavation in exchange for exclusive rights to findings. He hints that there are powerful interests who want to keep whatever is buried there hidden. The situation becomes politically charged. You must decide whether to continue pursuing the truth or step back to avoid personal and professional jeopardy. On a rooftop in Cairo, you review the data under the desert stars. You ponder the ethics of excavation. Tunnels and chambers, if they exist, may be fragile, and opening them could damage priceless heritage. You also think about how easily myths can fill gaps in knowledge. The Hall of Records narrative, for example, comes from 20th century psychic readings, yet it has seeped into popular consciousness. You ask yourself whether you are chasing a story or legitimate science. The answer lies in rigorous analysis, verifying data, considering alternative explanations like subsurface cracks or modern drainage works. You decide to publish your findings in a peer-reviewed journal, emphasizing uncertainty and avoiding sensational claims. The Sphinx keeps its counsel, but your understanding of how science and lore intertwine deepens. One theory asserts there are natural cavities beneath the Sphinx formed by groundwater erosion, later interpreted as chambers. Another posits that ancient Egyptians carved tunnels for maintenance or ritual purposes which have since been sealed. Believers in lost civilizations argue that the voids house records of Atlantis or advanced technology hidden by priests. Skeptics maintain that instrumentation errors created false positives in the surveys. Some Egyptologists suggest that the anomalies may be rubble-filled pits from earlier excavations by 19th century treasure hunters. Without excavation and thorough documentation, each idea remains speculation. The debate highlights how little is truly known about what lies under our feet. A year later, your paper is published, sparking both interest and criticism. The Antiquities Ministry allows a limited supervised drilling of one anomaly, which reveals a small void filled with sand and pottery shards, possibly a storage niche from a later period. There is no grand library. Yet, the existence of even a modest space shows that assumptions can be wrong. Other anomalies remain untested. You continue working in acoustics occasionally, giving lectures on your experiences. When asked if you believe there is a hall of records, you smile and say that the real records lie in the stones themselves, in the work of the artisans, and the reverence of people who built and preserved the Sphinx. As you walk past the monument on a weekend, children play nearby. The Sphinx watches silently, keeping its secrets for another generation of curious minds to ponder. Texarkana Moonlight Murders, Phantom Killer of the Night. As a criminologist specializing in cold cases, you've studied patterns of violence across decades. The Texarkana Moonlight Murders of 1946 stand out for their brutality and the enduring mystery surrounding the perpetrator. Over 10 weeks, an unknown assailant attacked 8 people in the border town of Texarkana, Texas, Arkansas, mostly courting couples parked on lovers' lanes. He wore a white mask and wielded a .32 caliber pistol. He killed 5 victims and seriously injured 3. Newspapers dubbed him the Phantom Killer. He was never caught. When you receive a grant to re-examine the case using modern investigative techniques, you travel to Texarkana. The small city still feels haunted. Locals lock their doors at dusk, and older residents whisper about the phantom as if he might reappear. You wonder whether there is new evidence to uncover, or if some ghosts resist exorcism. The case file includes ballistic reports, autopsy notes, and witness statements. You intend to digitize these and run modern ballistic comparison on recovered bullets. You also plan to test surviving evidence for DNA, though years and handling may have degraded samples. The survivors' accounts describe a tall man with heavy breathing eyes behind a mask. They recall phrases he uttered like telling a victim not to scream. Your goal is to build a behavioral profile and cross-reference with military records. Many suspects were questioned at the time, including war veterans suffering trauma. Understanding who might have committed the crimes and why could bring closure. You know you may not identify the killer, but you hope to reduce speculation and humanize the victims beyond their newspaper monikers. Texarkana in 1946 was a small town recovering from World War II. Couples would park on secluded roads to escape watchful eyes. The first attack occurred on February 20, leaving 2 wounded. The second in March left a couple dead. The third in April resulted in another murder. The final attack in May targeted families in their farmhouse, killing the husband and severely injuring the wife. The killer struck on weekends under a waxing moon. Law enforcement agencies from 2 states collaborated but faced jurisdictional complexities. Panic gripped the town. Vigilante groups patrolled streets. Sales of guns and locks skyrocketed. Films like The Town That Dreaded Sundown later fictionalized the events, cementing them in pop culture. Various suspects emerged: a saxophone-playing soldier, a car thief, a local drifter. None were charged. You obtained permission to access evidence stored in a county facility. There you examine clothing with bullet holes and dried blood. Unfortunately, DNA extraction yields nothing usable. Ballistic testing of bullets recovered from different scenes confirms they were fired from the same weapon. No match exists in current databases. You review police interviews and notice overlooked details. One survivor mentioned a distinctive cologne scent. Another recalled the killer's soft hands, perhaps indicating he was not a laborer. You interview the children of a chief suspect, a recluse named Ul Swinney, who was arrested for car theft around the time. They recall their father being absent on weekends. Another candidate, a veteran with psychiatric issues, committed suicide in 1948. Your behavioral profile suggests someone with pent-up rage, familiarity with the area, and ability to appear harmless. As you compile your findings, resistance surfaces. A local historian warns you not to dredge up painful memories. Family members of suspects contact you angry that you might accuse a deceased relative. One threatens legal action. At the same time, a true crime podcast announces a sensational episode claiming to reveal the Phantom's identity based on flimsy hearsay. Your grant funders pressure you to produce results. You feel the weight of expectation and the limitations of evidence degraded over time. One evening, while examining files at the courthouse, you notice a man watching you from across the street. He disappears into an alley. Your rational brain knows he's probably a passerby, but part of you feels the Phantom's presence. You experience firsthand the town's long-standing paranoia. You realize that the Texarkana murders are more than a whodunit. They represent a community's vulnerability at a time of social change. The war had brought violent skills home. Mental health resources were scarce. The killer exploited secluded lovers' lanes, perhaps resenting youth or intimacy. The attacks ended as abruptly as they began. Maybe the perpetrator died, moved away, or found other outlets. Without modern forensic records, law enforcement lacked tools to follow leads. Your investigation cannot conjure evidence that no longer exists. You decide your role is to document the victims' lives and contextualize the crimes. You interview surviving relatives who recall the victims as musicians, churchgoers, students, not just victims. Humanizing them feels like an act of justice. Suspects include Ul Swinney, a repeat offender, whose wife told police he confessed, then recanted. He fits some eyewitness descriptions. Another theory implicates a veteran who lived nearby and committed suicide. Some suggest multiple perpetrators copying initial attacks. A fringe theory posits that the killer was a woman pointing to the cologne as perfume. Still others think the Phantom moved on to another region, becoming a different serial killer. Without DNA or confession, none can be confirmed. The pattern of attacks and sudden cessation complicate profiling. Theories reflect our need to name a villain and restore order. When your research is published as a book, it receives modest attention. Some praise your empathy, others criticize the lack of a definitive culprit. You return to Texarkana for a lecture. An elderly man approaches you afterward, tears in his eyes, and thanks you for telling his sister's story. As you leave, the full moon rises above the town. Car headlights flash on a distant road. You think about the Phantom killer, whether he was Ul Swinney, another suspect, or someone unknown, and how he vanished into history. The town still locks its doors, but the fear has softened. The murders remain unsolved, but through your work, the victims are remembered as more than headlines. You walk back to your hotel, hearing only the hum of cicadas and the soft thrum of your own heart. The Osirian. Submerged temple at Abydos. Behind the grand mortuary temple of Seti at Abydos lies a sunken structure known as the Osirian. It consists of a rectangular basin surrounded by massive granite pillars, partially filled with water year-round. Carved chambers connect to the basin via corridors. Archaeologists date its construction to the New Kingdom, yet some claim it predates Seti's temple. On a trip to Egypt, you were determined to see this enigmatic site often overlooked by tourists. The idea of a temple perpetually underwater fascinated you. Your interest was piqued by a documentary hinting that the Osirian's megalithic blocks bear no inscriptions unlike later temples. Some fringe authors suggest it is evidence of an antediluvian structure reused by Seti. Conversely, Egyptologists argue it represents an underground representation of the primeval mound, rising from chaotic waters fitting within known religious narratives. You wanted to decide for yourself if its architecture felt different from surrounding structures. Passing through Seti's temple with its colorful reliefs, you descended a walkway to the Osirian. The temperature dropped. Before you lay a trench filled with clear water reflecting the sky. Rectangular granite blocks, some weighing dozens of tons, framed the basin. They were precisely cut and fitted, their surfaces smooth but mottled by lichen. Pillars rose from the water like the trunks of petrified trees. Narrow chambers with barrel ceilings flanked the central pool. The faint sound of dripping echoed. The air smelled of damp stone and algae. Wading along a walkway, you touched the granite. It was cool and dense. Peering into the water, you saw small fish darting among submerged blocks. On a wall, a faint inscription added by Seti recorded his restoration. The absence of decoration on most blocks felt intentional, focusing attention on form rather than image. When you pressed your ear to a pillar, you heard a low resonance like distant thunder. As you moved into a side chamber, you felt pressure in your ears, similar to descending underwater. Your balance faltered for a moment, as if the room gently swayed. Later, while standing at the edge of the basin, a sudden gust blew through the corridor, making ripples on the water. The ripples propagated in patterns that looked like waves emanating from 2 points intersecting to form standing patterns. You watched, mesmerized. In that moment, you recalled images of somatic shapes formed by sound waves on surfaces. Were the ripples coincidental, or did the Osirian amplify subtle environmental vibrations? The idea that water, stone, and sound intertwined here took hold. Back home, you delved into scholarship. Mainstream Egyptologists state the Osirian to Seti's reign, citing structural similarities to his temple. Its lower elevation and water infiltration may be due to rising water tables. The lack of inscriptions could be because it served a ritual purpose requiring austerity. Fringe writers point to a cartouche labeling it the mansion of millions of years, linking it to Osiris cult, and argue it could be older. Some propose it was a technological structure, a resonator or energy generator. Engineers note that the granite's density and arrangement could create acoustic effects. Theories vary. Some see the Osirian as a symbolic tomb of Osiris, representing his death and rebirth in watery depths. Others think it was a cenotaph for Seti built in an archaizing style. There is speculation that its builders sought to evoke antiquity deliberately by using megalithic blocks. A more exotic idea suggests it is a surviving fragment of an earlier temple, submerged by flood reused by later dynasties. The interplay of water and stone invites interpretations involving ritual purification and sound. Since visiting, you sometimes replay the memory of ripples forming interfering patterns in your bathwater. The sound of distant thunder reminds you of the low resonance within the pillars. When you hear water dripping in a cave, you recall the cool air of the Osirian and the sense of descending to a primordial place. The site, with its mix of orthodox history and speculative theories, left you with the impression that sometimes mysteries are less about being solved and more about being felt as relationships between elements and senses that cannot be fully articulated. Why Egyptians defaced royal tombs, erasing the eternal. In ancient Egypt, preserving the name and image of the deceased was essential for afterlife survival. Yet, archaeologists find royal tombs with names and faces chiseled away. The faces of Hatshepsut, Akhenaten, and others were defaced deliberately. Was it political vengeance, religious reform, or protective magic? As an Egyptologist, you toured several tombs with defaced cartouches. The thought of priests chiseling away what they were sworn to protect fascinated and saddened you. One tomb in particular, belonging to a lesser-known queen, drew you into its shadowy chambers. You were inspired by a research paper analyzing tool marks on defaced reliefs. It suggested different hands, some careful, some angry. The idea that erasure could be ritualized or spontaneous intrigued you. Theories ranged from damnatio memoriae to demonic protection. You wanted to see the marks up close. The Valley of the Queens in Luxor, with fewer tourists than the Valley of the Kings, offered a quiet setting to contemplate ancient censorship. The tomb's walls were vibrant with frescoes of the queen in ritual scenes. Yet in many, her face was scratched out, leaving oval depressions. The hieroglyphs of her name were gouged. Small plaster patches covered deeper gouges. Running your fingers near, never on the carvings, you felt the texture change where defacement occurred. In some scenes, other figures remained intact, suggesting targeted erasure. The air was cool and smelled of dust and resin. A bat fluttered overhead. As you sketched, a small pebble fell from the ceiling, landing near your foot. The silence closed in. Later, while reading inscriptions, you noted spells designed to protect tombs from those who would damage them. Ironically, those same spells failed to prevent later desecration. You visited Akhenaten's Sun Temple ruins. His images were smashed. In Hatshepsut's mortuary temple, her statues had been buried or recarved. Some defacements seemed purposeful, erasing a memory. Others looked like reuse of stone with names chiseled off to make way for new ones. The motives varied across time. Scholars propose multiple reasons. One is political successors sought to erase rivals to legitimize their rule. Another is religious images of heretical rulers like Akhenaten were destroyed to appease gods. A more personal motive might be jealousy or local grievances. Some think defacing images protected the tomb from looters by breaking the magical link to the afterlife. There's also evidence that tomb builders reused limestone blocks, chiseling off earlier names out of practicality. The pebble falling could have been geology or a reminder of time's constant erosion. Afterward, you notice graffiti in modern cities differently. Images scratched out new ones, spray painted over. You think about how erasure can be both violent and bureaucratic. When you cross out a word in your notes, you wonder how that small act echoes ancient chisels. Tombs with defaced names remind you that memory is not just preserved, but actively constructed and destroyed. They also highlight the resilience of stories, as we still know Hatshepsut, despite attempts to erase her. The queen whose face you saw defaced remains nameless to most, yet her scarred images speak volumes about power and vulnerability.